What's going on, everyone? It's David Palmer, Leo King, and Dylan, Human Design Maven, for Before Dawn on this September the 7th of 2022. Before we go into the show, we're doing an awesome event where you can catch Dylan and I live here at the High Vibe TV studios or live stream the event, The Last Full Moon of Summer, Where Is This Reality Going? You can go on highvibe.tv, go to the website, and we have Last Moon there. You click that. I've made a page for it about the event. We're going to have Natalie on hosting an awesome panel from Full Disclosure. We're going to have Erica Othen and Lauren on as well. We have Brian, Fixed Air Moon, of course. He's going to be doing an astrology lecture. And then, of course, I'm doing spiritual dance music, and Erica's going to do a sound healing, all here at the High Vibe TV studios. You can get tickets for in-studio or the live stream event. It will be from 7 p.m. Pacific until about midnight. So looking forward to seeing you all on Friday night. What is going on, Dylan? And you have your retreat coming up too.
I do. I'm super excited about the event, and we've got our Peru retreat at the end of this October. We're going to the Sacred Valley. We're visiting the sacred pilgrimage sites. We're activating the stargates. It's not to be missed. If you resonate with this material, check it out. It's on my Instagram, or just reach out directly and we'll connect.
Definitely a sacred time in the astrology too, with it all
the
happening.
Eclipse cycle. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, at least you'll be in a good grounded place.
Very, very protected energy there.
Yeah. You know, I know we're going to go into a lot of subjects. Of course, this is being are people really prepared, I think, for the Great Reset? And that, of course, has our way of doing the show in a much deeper form.
Mm-hmm.
But we were talking earlier about the cities right now.
Mm-hmm.
And when you really take a look at the decaying of cities, I know it's easy to go to politics or it's easy to go to this, but I think this show is really going to help people see the decaying of the frequency that we're seeing. And it's really, it's kind of sad in a way, but I think that's a weird part of the movie we're all here to watch.
I think that's the best context in which we can view all of these big shifts and changes that are happening, is that, you know, even as Ra, my teacher, explained and shared with us that this is a movie that we're here to watch. And if we're alive at this time, it's not a mistake. It's not that we missed out. We've come here during this really difficult time. It's because we're here to see this, because it's what we came here to see. And this is an extremely rare time to live one lifetime in. You know, usually, you know, you're just in the middle of a cycle or the beginning of a cycle. So to be present at the end when such drastic shifts are changing is, within the right context, it's a very captivating movie to catch. And so it's all about the perspective that we hold in our minds. It's all about the attitude that we carry in our hearts. And it's all about understanding that when we have a strategy and authority that's in our being, that is our beingness, that is our direct connection to source, essentially through this form, that we can enjoy this ride and be properly positioned to experience these shifts.
Yeah, because I feel like when we think about any shift, it is frequency. Like it's a changing, like, of a radio station. When you're like, and you have to think of the universe like getting kind of bored too of the same channel, right? It's kind of like, okay, that channel's played out, and all right, let's slowly move that station, and there's that in between, and that's the decay that we start to see of it. And I think that's the hardest part, I think, for people, is getting stuck on that it's such a bad show when really it's the revealer of great truth, that so many people are here to see what's the illusion of what would always be. It's not so much that it was fake, maybe. It's much more of that we're watching what you think will always stay intact, not be, which is truth.
Right. And what does the apocalypse mean? Apocalypse just means an unveiling. It's a time to be aware of what were the dynamics and the mechanics that went into creating this era, and all the systems and structures and traditions and belief systems that have dominated this time, and to now see what's behind all that and what really stands when the frequency shifts. What are the true, consistent principles and energies that make our world what it is. It's not what we see in the world today. It's not what you see in a major city. There are deeper constants to this planet, to this life here on Earth. And we're getting to see what those fundamental constants are now, as year by year, moment by moment, as we move towards the next shift in 2027. These old pieces of the reality are kind of just flashing out of being.
Yeah.
And what's left will be the things that have probably always given us life, the things that have always carried us, the things that have always sustained us. We've just built up this certain movie set around the planet, around our experience. We've gotten so used to it, so comfortable with this. And now it's time to really rediscover the truth of who we are without all of that, imposed comfort zone, essentially.
Yeah, because I feel that comfort zone is very highly connected with the ages shifting, and Pisces. It's Jupiter ruled originally, where Zeus is, I've got all the understanding of everything, and I can expand and go into wherever I want. But there's a point of where this Aquarian is ruled by Saturn first. It always is right. Saturn, and it's contraction, and it also is limitation in a way. Mm-hmm. But that's actually where we grow as humans, is knowing our limits, where that might be the hard part of like the realization of, there's that whole idea that, we are manifestors and manifest anything in the universe that we want. Mm-hmm. But there are limitations, right? Like if you try to actually have too much air, you can actually, if you ever do breath work, it's very exciting, but it also can be psychedelic, and it can take you almost too far, and it can be very uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. Or if you don't get enough air, you starve yourself. I mean, there's these basic principles, and that's what I think is coming in, is like a common sense energy. Mm-hmm. Whereas the idea of like when you hear in, let's say sacred geometry, it's like humans build in lines, but God does not build in lines. Right? Like
God builds in spirals.
Right. So it's like, it's almost kind of like the illusion that, the planning structures, mm-hmm. that will survive through the spirals of the universe and time, which not even, when you look at what's happening up in the universe, there's no constant of that's a guarantee that it will stay there forever. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right? Like, that star starts floating into this system, and it starts getting too close to something else, and it spirals in and takes over it and eats it, or a black hole might take it, or whatever it might be. Mm-hmm. And I feel like we're at that place to where humanity's consciousness will only find truth. It's like the Matrix, the whole like thing coming down of like what's really there. It might not be pods and computers that are ruling it all at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. It might just be the illusion that we created of the great society.
It's like, it's been a party, in this age of Jupiter, in this Piscean age, it's been a party. It's like we've built up all these decorations and these elaborate structures, and it's all been this celebration of our capability and our consciousness and our ability to strategize and conquer, the world. And then the universe is kind of like, okay, party's over. You got to go back to basics, basically, back to the origin, because we all know what it looks like when somebody overstays their welcome at a party. It's just not a good look.
Or we have to keep evolving, right? So it's kind of like, hey, we got to keep evolving. That was a fun party, but don't you want a better party? It's just going to look a lot different. Like as mm-hmm. a kid, right? It's like, I don't want a birthday party anymore with
dinosaurs.
Like dinosaurs and like
Barbies.
Little, Barbie. I guess, I never had those, but the little birthday hat, the little cone.
Oh.
I
will rock a birthday cone.
I mean, I will too, but it's kind of like where it's, I don't know if I'd want to be doing that all day and like entrap people in my house and say, hey, I planned my birthday to be like this. You're all going to wear that and you can't leave
until 4
p.m. But that's kind of what the cross of planning has been, is like everybody must do this. And it's the reliance upon too many outside resources instead of your own self.
And that's actually gotten in between us and us. A lot of we're like plugged into these systems that require our life force to be sustained. And that's gone on for so long that we have these huge wedges between who we really are and what we have to do to maintain what this cross of planning has been pumping through us through the background frequencies. So I think that's what's really cool to see, is that the age of the sleeping phoenix is about the individual. And if we look at it from that perspective, it doesn't have to be so doomsday. It doesn't have to be so scary. It's more about the resourcefulness of the individual. And, you know, a huge part of the sleeping phoenix is gate 55, which is the gate of spirit. This is the place where, as an individual being and as a whole, as a collective in humanity, we can wake up to the truth that we're all just different lenses for one consciousness. And that consciousness is going to be freer than ever to express itself in individuated ways, instead of having to be corralled into these giant institutional flows of, here are the rules and regulations, here are the skills you must have, here's the contracts you must sign in order to just be able to be here. It's like the universe is saying, here, I'm putting the power back in your hands completely. Now, what are you going to do with it?
Yeah, and I think that's the hard part, is the idea of, you know, I think Ross says it in some of his lectures best, right? Like, you call 911, we've become too, you know, oh, well, they'll be there, they'll show up. But it's like, this is where, and it's been really wild to see since, I forget which episode, maybe 5 weeks ago, when that North Node Uranus went, and we said, this is the beginning, and to watch every system right now, just energy systems right now are a big one, or even just watching our institutional systems, where everybody's just like, they're not working, or DoorDash, or when you order something to go now, they don't even give you a fork anymore. They don't even give you ketchup packets anymore. Like, nothing, those things that you're easily relying upon. It's like, I better go to the store and buy some forks because I know they ain't going to have them now. Mm-hmm. It's like, these are like minor things, but they're going to go just in the next 3 to 4 years, just like everything like that times bigger things.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, Saturn-Pluto transits get a bad rap as these destructive moments in time, but if we really look back to that time in 2020 and what were the immediate effects on our access to food or whatever supplies that we require to live in this world, it was like for weeks on end, you may have not been able to get any of that. The stores were empty, everything was barred up and closed down. It's like, that was a preview. That was Saturn.
The toilet paper was a preview.
The toilet paper. That was Saturn giving you a heads up as to what you need to be prepared for. And it's not necessarily prepared in the sense of, I've got 500 packets of toilet paper in my garage. It's just in terms of spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, what do you need to be ready to meet your own needs in relation to going forward? And I think it's also in the narrative that we hold. There's a huge war over the narrative right now. Left versus right, red versus blue, you know, fundamentalists versus the new shoots of whatever belief system. And it's like, it's all just trying to grab your attention away from the fact that none of this is going to be here anyway. You know, these are small problems in comparison to what we need to take into our own hands. And the sooner the better. You know, the sooner the better that we can anchor ourselves into our true inner authority, which is our access to knowing how to navigate, when to go, where to go, with whom to go with. And these are things that we need to be taking seriously, because it's almost as if we have this giant sense of societal codependency with these systems. And that if we just keep giving away a little piece of us, we'll get what we need back and we'll get our needs met. And that's not conducive to our evolution either. It's just too easy.
Right. And I'm glad that you brought up the Saturn-Pluto transit, because it's one that also does change the time. And especially that happened in Capricorn.
The Lord of Time.
The Lord of Time with a South Node. So there was a very karmic, like predetermined, this is the illusion of the time system ending. Mm-hmm. And it's interesting, if we can bring it up, Brian, I want to show people the next Saturn-Pluto, just to think real far ahead, which is in Pisces in 2053.
Exciting.
It's on a 33-year cycle, right? There's like this weird 33 with Saturn-Pluto, which I know that could trigger people about masonry, right? Isn't that kind of interesting, right? That like a lot of people go, oh, 2020 was because the Masons did it all or something. But there is something to say the 33-year cycle of Saturn-Pluto can be very significant to it. It's going to miss Aquarius and come into Pisces. And so if you think about the end of the age of Pisces, the end of the illusions, this 33 years we're in is the end of time. And then it's coming into the sign of endings, which is Pisces, which is like the end of illusions itself by itself. And really having to really come into a completely different radical world that is not going to be one where, I don't know, the real spiritual energy will only be allowed to be around, which I think there's been too much new age idealization about the idea of what the future looks like for spirituality, or what spirituality is supposed to look like, or even what the world's supposed to look like through the lens of that.
Yeah, that new age lens is really hinging upon that savior complex that we've been kind of contemplating. It's like that we're going to be, the ones that save everyone, or there's going to be some greater force that saves all of us. There's always this kind of deferring the authority still to something outside ourselves that is seemingly more powerful, more wise, more aware. And the thing about, as a Pisces, that I know about Pisces is, yes, it's a sign of endings, but it's actually a beautiful ending. It's a wrapping up of a lot of things, many of which were not really working that well anyway.
Right.
It's a closing out of karmic cycles. And as you close out all of those cycles of limitation, you open yourself up to realizing that you have access to everything. And I think that's what that next Saturn-Pluto is really going to reveal, is that even deeper layer of the illusion of even this reality itself might be drifting away, or kind of phasing out of our consciousness. And what's revealed behind that is the greater truth of the universe itself, and what that may inspire in us as a species. I mean, at 2053, we'll be well into welcoming the raves into the world and seeing that next consciousness, that next evolution, that next vibration beginning to take hold and make those frequency shifts, because everything is vibration, everything is frequency. So when you experience fundamental shifts on that level of this matrix, of this Maya, it's unimaginable to us now, because we're so gripped into how we know things to be. But there's so much more to this life, and to even us as beings, that we kind of miss out on because we're so entrenched in these cycles and systems.
It's also interesting because I love how you brought up in Pisces, it's so much more than just endings. It's beautiful endings, it's karmic endings, but it also is the stuff that is not good for us in spiritual alignment, period. Right? It's interesting, though, the year that follows, as Saturn finally passes Pluto in 2054, Chiron will be in Capricorn, exactly where the Saturn-Pluto happened. So the Band-Aid of the 33 to 34 years of 2020 will finally be healed. The people will finally be, okay, yeah, I'm over that whole thing. And I've been saying that for a long time for people, is like, people are going to have to accept what this end is in Capricorn that happened, which is systems, the way that you think the control systems work. And that is when you give authority outside yourself to it. Like I can't heal myself if I have a cut. I have to go to the doctor to get that done. Well, if you're in the forest for pretty much all of human history up until this little 100 years, I mean, because let's be real, in the 1850s and 60s, especially 60s during the Civil War, they just took a hatchet and went, we're cutting your leg off. Bang! I mean, it's not like they were great, amazing doctors, They had some salt and they had a hatchet, and they literally were just like, shink! There you go. So it's like, the idea that people are so stuck on the planning system the way that it is, it's not working anymore, because it's creating a weaker soul. It's creating a weaker humanity, because it's just reliant on, well, unless the school taught me that, and unless this has taught me this, unless my peers are doing it, unless I get this info from outside of myself, then I can't do it myself. I can't
trust myself
Yeah.
enough to just take that action on my own.
Now, I have an interesting question for you, because we have, I feel, a mimic of the Great Reset. The real Great Reset is the secular one, right? The ones
Galactic Reset.
The Galactic Reset, the human design, switching of the two crosses, the astrological one that has happened with Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter, and eclipses and nodes. That was like, this is the end of a time period in life, and a new one that's going to be completely different. When people hear the Great Reset, they just think of the World Economic Forum. They think of I feel like these are mimicking systems, and in a weird way, because they're in the view of so many people in the truth community and stuff, it's almost like they're ramping it up faster than the 2030 agenda, right? And I'm like, okay, well, 2030, it's not even going to be able to do that. So it's like, do you feel like it's a mimic? And it's like, I feel like the dark energies try to mimic what's just the spiritual energy, but do you feel that? But do you also feel that because there's a knowing in people who really do this work, that they're positioning themselves to enjoy the movie with as much as they can, knowing it's kind of fight for yourself at the end, where everybody's so scared that they're going to be trying to take them over? I feel like it's the opposite. They're just trying to take over as much resource as possible to make it an easier thing for them at the end of the day, to where they know the reliance systems will be gone and they have as much as they have to make themselves independently reliant upon.
Well, these cyclical changes of the ages and the locks and the keys in, the G center of the world, essentially the monopole of the world. We feel this on a deep subatomic level. Even if our conscious mind isn't particularly aware of it, even if we haven't been doing the work and we're just people out there in the world just living their lives, there is this deep soul level sense that great change is happening and is coming. And so if they can become that Wizard of Oz figure that's saying, we're the ones doing this, we're the puppet masters, but even play it in a way that it seems like they're trying to hide that they're doing that. So it kind of acts and takes advantage of our
energy, harvesting our auric energy and our power that
what
we
we
generate.
don't know in our conscious mind. Then it's like they take advantage of our uncertainty. They take advantage of the deep shifts we feel in our soul, and they try and point all of our conscious focus, and where focus goes, energy flows. And they point it at them, and they're trying to, take all of that conscious energy and make it their medium, even though they know probably on a deep level that their time is coming to an end as well. But, even if you knew your time was coming, you would probably fight as hard as you possibly could to stay in power, to stay who you are, to stay in integrity with all you've known and become accustomed to. And that's another thing. Like when we get to these ends of cycles, all of the attributes of that cycle and all of the structures and systems and emanations that come from that, they fight for dominance. They fight to keep alive. Just like when people are close to passing, they get that last burst of energy to experience their life force before it goes. So all of these fundamentalist viewpoints, all of these hardcore truths that we think are going to light the way forward are just the last gasps, basically, of the cross of planning. And these are such large and impersonal cycles that we really have to understand even those beings are at the behest of these greater energies, because it's all frequency. And we all have to be here in this Maya, whether you're organic being or not. So you're still at the mercy of what that medium is undergoing.
Well, and it's about how your strategy and authority is. So I feel as if there's a subconscious element that's going to be hard for all people, including people who are in these places that people give them the authority, right? Really, right? That it's like a natural subconscious thing, even for somebody like me, knowing who pays my taxes, who pays my rent, who pays for bills, right? Like there's this aspect where you see the economy falling apart. You see the monetary systems. You see the connections between countries falling apart. You see, right, because that was how they started this year, right? We're all allied, NATO, yay. Now they're all squabbling over energy and power and not whether or not they're going to stay together or not. There's already massive calls right now in the EU. Well, Americans were on Labor Day of like, we need to just end this whole like EU thing or end this whole like NATO alliance at the moment to survive, right? So I feel like there's a natural survival instinct of like, well, there's no more money in the systems and we've been running this false like monetary
Ponzi
system
scheme.
and all these things, and just do whatever you can till the last minute to do it. Take every loan we got, print as much cash, do whatever, and just keep it.
It's the grand liquidation sale of the cost
Right.
of planning.
It really is just like just keep the fucking plates spinning until they fly off. When
Keep
they're ready,
partying.
they're already flying off.
And what's the antidote? It's all about coming back to the realization and the knowing that if you know yourself, if you're rooted in your authority, you have nothing to fear,
Zero.
because each one of us is an authority in and of ourselves. And as I've been sharing with a lot of clients lately to kind of help ease this anxiety, it's about understanding that the grids of the planet that will always be here as long as this planet is in its form, you know, these are conscious grids, and you have a conscious grid system, and that's your human design template. So the planet knows who you are. And the more that you know who you are and that you resonate in strength and power with your own inner authority, the planet will help you know where you need to go. You will be guided based on your momentums to where you need to be. And this is what this episode is about. It's about positioning yourself in your inner authority in preparation for these grand shifts, and knowing that, like Ra was saying in that lecture that we were listening to, if you have your grounding in your own self, you're going to be given a ticket to watch this show in one of the best seats in the house.
I think the exact thing he said is those who are in their own authority get tickets to the movie. Those without aren't going to be having a fun time.
Right. In his super intense fifth line voice.
Yeah, and I, of course, loved it. I was like, yeah. But I like it because that's where it's at. Like, you feel solid in a movie theater when you're secure with yourself. You're not worried about if there's going to be a fire in it. You're not worried about the external energies. You're just like, I'm here to enjoy the
You're
picture.
completely
I'm here to
resting
enjoy
in your seat,
Yeah.
comfortable in the darkness, and you're focused on enjoying the show and enjoying the ride.
Yeah, and that's what I think, you know, people who really enjoy movies know how to do really well. And then you see people who really don't like movies, they're like, well, I can't just sit down and watch that. And they kind of get all sporadic and exterior motives or mental thoughts. Where a movie's something where you don't really think about it, you experience it. You let that auric field, and you respond to it with your emotion, or you respond to it like, I don't like it. It doesn't matter. At least you're able to accept the universe and respond to it, which is interesting. That's kind of a nice test of your authority. Can you sit through a movie, even if it's the worst movie in the world,
Right.
and watch it all the way through and then go, what's my response to that? What's my authority I'm going to take off that? Am I going to take any? You don't have to. You could just be like, yeah, I didn't like it. It was whatever. Or it could change your life and give you an idea for something that you want to respond to in life. Or it's kind of a very basic test in your life.
Yeah. It's kind of like watching a movie on a plane, because you're there in the movie or in the experience of whatever you're watching. And then there's this external energy, like that flight might be going through massive turbulence, and you can't get up out of that theater. You know, you just have to continue enjoying the ride as best you can, and knowing that there's no choice in that scenario. You're there. So your reaction to that is defining your experience. And you can drive yourself crazy and you can be freaking out, or you can just try and find that inner sense of excitement, because, you know, as some study has shown, like fear and excitement are the same energy. It's just about, what is that being filtered through?
Yeah.
Is that being filtered through a sense of trust? And, you know, trust is something that needs to be developed. It's not something you can necessarily just click on. And I think that's where the preparation begins, is do you have a relationship of trust within yourself, within the universe, within what you understand as what's guiding you in this life? And if you do, then this could be one of the most exhilarating experiences that anyone's had in a long time. And that could be a very cool ride.
Yeah, and I think the idea of a movie playing and then a movie theater, and even if it's the worst cataclysmic movie of all time and it comes to an end, the theater's still going to be there.
Right.
And a new movie will be playing, just a completely different movie to have a different understanding of, response to. And instead of crying all day about the credits and then not saying you want to, or trying to ask the projector, guy, like, can you rewind it for me? I want to watch it again. I don't want to watch the next movie. I don't want to see the next thing. It's like, that's what's kind of happening right now. It's people are not seeing that there's a new movie, and they're getting filtered through the fears that these outer authority systems are going to win, that these outer authority systems are going to take over. Although I will say, near the end of this frequency ending, this is where it does start to get a little wild, because there will be people who are going to start to try to do their craziest shit because they don't want it to end.
Right. Kicking and screaming.
Kicking and screaming and taking their moral compass off, because they're not going off authority, or they're not coming off of strategy at all. They're going off of mind, like the panic of what the mind is saying to do. And that's where, it's about having a good seat. But when he says that, to have a seat at the theater, it's kind of like, well, if there's a fight going on in the movie theater, if I have a choice of my seat, I'm going to sit back here where that energy is not going to affect me in the theater. I can't get out of the theater, so, right? But it's kind of like, this is where I think coming up here, especially I feel like through this fall and into 2023, it's going to be like, let's pick our seats in the best way we really can here. Like, let's not just say, well, I got a seat, thank God. We can actually, I feel, really choose a really amazing seat.
And I think that's what these eclipses are attempting to offer to us, is that even if we've been a little bit behind on developing that self-trust, we've been a little bit out of connection with that universal trust. That's the power of an eclipse. Yeah, sometimes it's almost tragic or overwhelming, the kinds of change that it brings to our small ego self, but they also are things that can take things out of our life that have been in our way the whole time anyway. And a lot of times these are things that we've so strongly identified with that it makes it, we mourn and we grieve them losing our life, or, them leaving our life, I should say. And at the same time, they're opening us up to such greater potentials and possibilities. And sometimes we just kind of need the universe to yank some stuff for us to really drop back down into our truth and appreciate what's in front of us or what's left.
Well, and I think the big point to what you're saying too is that there is no stopping where we're going, right? Like, so it's about,
and there are no refunds.
And there's no refunds. I want to show this because I want to take an inverse to the two crosses as an interesting way from a galactic point of view, as the sun. This is where we see how our solar system, especially the Earth, as it's going in its own, cycle that it does around the galactic plane. So of course we're here. This is the 2020 alignment of the sun reaching the galactic plane. But here is the understanding that there's a galactic pole shift, right? So there's a north galactic pole and a south one. And when you think of, we've seen the sun do that as we entered into the last year, right? 2021. We've seen the scientific community saying the Earth is due for its pole shift. But also they're saying that the galactic pole of our Milky Way galaxy is ready for its shift. So when you think of the new cross coming in, there's no stopping the sun at all, or else everything would fall apart. That'd be the true catastrophism if we tried to stop things from happening, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
The more that we try to stop something from happening, it reminds me of like tarot and Wheel of Fortune. When you just like want to try and say, no, don't turn the wheel, like that's when it goes bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like even if it's a moment in life where it might not be the most exciting and fun, it's the only way to get it to where it keeps moving to where life goes. This too shall pass, right? Even the cross of Sleeping Phoenix will one day, this shall pass.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that this is a very different, or maybe a way for people to conceptualize. For somebody like me, it was like, wow, the frequency's ending and the new one's coming in. And when I think of frequency, I think of magnetics. I think of the way that the frequencies of the universe work. I think of the clockwork of the whole universe and how we see it, especially in our solar system, and how we see it in our galaxy, and how it's got a beautiful clockwork that's beyond a human's ability to create in itself, right? And that it's all lining at the end of this cross of planning with a shift. And when we look at history and we look at the 12,000 year cycles of Earth, and it's ironic that there's so much climate change being talked about. Well, everything is preparing itself and kind of freaking. It's not freaking actually, because I feel like the nature doesn't freak. I feel like nature's like, okay, yeah, that frequency's stopping, so we're kind of adjusting for the new station that's being tuned in. Because I think if you think on this larger scale, it's like, holy crap, if we were to inverse and flip the pole of the sun, which we do, but now we do the Earth and then we do the galaxy, it literally would be the opposite of what you would think life would be completely. This outer authority life, we have a society, I'll drive to that. They're going to make the car for me. They're going to make this. They're going to make the cameras. We're all connected through the internet. Or as Ra says, it's the we turning into the me, I frequency.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, if we've gotten so accustomed to a system that's actually an inversion of what the truth is, then what we're actually looking at is a return to a more aligned order. And that means that in itself is an unveiling. That in itself is the end of a certain kind of illusion that we've ever been able to believe that this is how life really works. Because it's not. It's artificial. We're worried about AI. Well, the entire system of how everything, even in this studio, has been created is, in a sense, artificial. And so when the universe or the galactic plane itself is just rolling over in bed, just flipping onto a different side to get more comfortable, for us, it's going to completely shift the way that we even orient as to what is up, what is down, what is forward, what is backward.
What is I was just saying, it's almost like I thought of the galaxy as like having a yang tattoo and then it rolling over and being like, there's a yin tattoo. Like, it's like, wait, what? Like, it's like that. It's like, I thought that was this, or wait, what? It's that. Mm-hmm. And it's similar but opposite,
And Ross says that we're going into a dark age, and that's really scary to us because we're so used to the light. And in terms of like the analogy of yin and yang, or yin and yang, even the way that the universe is like, well, as we call it in human design, the biverse exists, is it's yin in nature. That's the real foundation of this reality, is the yin, is the darkness. So to say that we're going into a dark age doesn't necessarily mean that we've lost everything and that we can't see and we don't know which way is up. It's actually that the principles and the emanations of the darkness, which is the origin, will be more prevalent. And the light, which is just the outer reaches of the illusion, is just the surface, will be kind of eclipsed to reveal what's behind it. So it may be a time in which illumination is no longer possible, but it may also be a time in which the true inner and understanding of how this all works and why we're all here and what it really all even is much clearer, much more plain to see.
Yeah, he described it as like the Eden story and the myth of it, and like Eden experiencing the myth from looking outside of it, like looking at the myth instead of being in the myth. Like Eden, like, well, that was a myth I was in. Mm-hmm. Or it could be like all of us looking outside of, gosh, it reminds me of that movie, The Never-Ending Story, where he's in the movie, where he's in the whole thing, but he's really the observer outside of it. And then he thinks he's in it, but he's really not, you know?
And
there's that weird inverse happening where it's like, we're going to be the observer of the myth that we were in. We could be in a story. That's the craziest part.
Yeah. I mean, there's a certain kind of therapy where the main focus is to consciously interact with your dreams. And by mastering the dream state, you know, that we consider in this world as like the unconscious state or the subconscious state, by mastering and changing the dream, you actually make huge shifts in the reality. And so it's like, if we go into this new phase where the darkness, the yin, is that much more apparent, it means that we have more direct access to that primary engine that creates the reality, and we actually have more agency. We actually have more freedom. We actually have more power. It's just not within the limited confines that we've become so accustomed to in this cross-road planning.
Which has reliance, right? Like, I have to get on the freeway to get to where I need to go, and then the street that I have to get to.
It's so manual labor oriented. It actually makes us so small in terms of our true creative power as beings. It makes us rely on even the dense physicality of everything to be the only way through which things are possible. And it's like we're getting closer to this deeper understanding that that's a very inefficient way of creating. If you really can go into the back end of reality, you know, if you think about it in terms of like coding, the back end is the ugly part that you don't see. You're only seeing the user interface.
Yeah.
This whole era has just been the user interface. And that's made us completely reliant on those programmers, the architects, whoever they may be. You know, maybe they're singular beings, maybe it's just life itself.
Yeah, I mean, I hate
Matrix
to
analogy.
use this analogy, but it reminds me of the people who have to rely on Geek Squad, which is a lot of people.
Oh, see? Yes.
Yeah, right? Like that idea of like, my computer's broken. I'm like, hold on, let me go into your BIOS. Oh, let me reinstall. Let me look back here. Let me like do I'll tune your fans real quick in the BIOS. Like, how do you do that? It's not on my Windows. It's not on my Mac. No, you got to go on the back end of the actual BIOS in the motherboard of the whole computer. But Geek Squad made so much money for so many years of so many people like, my Mac broke because I left it on my bed sheets and the fan, it always got really hot and now it doesn't work. It's like, I don't know what to do. It's like
they made all that money off ignorance.
They did.
And so this is a time in which ignorance is the bliss that's being stripped from us. And those that will prosper and rise up in this next era are those that are willing to look at what they don't know and embrace that and show up for that.
Yeah, it reminds me of the air conditioning went out here last year, and it's been hot, of course, here. And so I went up there on the roof myself, and I was able to find the fix myself. And then I was able to call a High Viber, who happens to be a huge air conditioner service here. And I'm like, yeah, this is it. This is, I don't know where to buy this part. Like, I looked everywhere. It was from like the 80s. And he was like, oh no, I know what that is. But it was like to where I got as far as I could, at least to know what I could do, but call somebody who could do what I needed to do, because I couldn't find that part anywhere. But if I would have spent more time, I probably could have, but it would have been, but it's like willing to, okay, let me go open it up myself. Let me go figure out what's going on. Like, cause that's kind of how like life really works in the best way to even get to this place we're at now. It wasn't for me calling up Geek Squad and saying, can you guys set up a TV studio for me?
Right.
There's no such thing out there.
Right.
So it's like, that's where it reminds me of like, a little bit Mad Maxy. I mean, you know, but without the overtones that become the tribal. Again, there's so much reliance in Mad Max about the tribes.
Right.
Where it kind of feels more like people are going to be a lot more like, hey, I'm just, it's like taking care of myself. Like
very seven-centered, right?
Yeah.
That seven-centered, strategic, survival, fear-based, you know, survival of the fittest kind of energy. It's like, what if we apply this idea of more self-reliance and self-responsibility to a energetic grid, a whole system that we'll be in that's more quantum, that's more connected to directly to source energy and that direct field of manifestation. Doesn't necessarily have to be so hard. It could be very much one of the easiest times if we're more consciously aware of our creative power, and that comes from our connection to source. And that's, I think, what these rave beings will really start to role model for us, is that, you know, when you're tapped into the quantum field, and when you're not so reliant on this idea of external survival and just your mind being the only force of agency and power in this Maya, you know, they'll just be showing us by their frequency how to do that, because they won't need us. And that's something that Ra made very clear. Yes, maybe in the beginning stages when the first raves are being born, and they're still being born into a very still seven-centered scheme, they're going to need that extra support to even connect to each other, to form the conscious penta. But once that first conscious penta is in, you know, full activation, full alignment, they're going to take off. They're just going to take off and do their own thing. And they're not going to be sitting around asking, oh, did you want some of this? Because that's not the modus operandi of a penta in general. The penta just seeks to move forward, to take in whatever it needs from its environment to continue its momentum of creation and generation, and essentially powering the G center to move forward on its trajectory. So
it's almost like, I know Aquarius is the sign of the water bearer, but what is it pouring water into? It seems to be that it's like to help. But I almost think I don't know, I'm channeling, seeing the raves and the penta coming together, and it's like on a lake, and you see them at the far end, and like, it's like they're doing things we've never seen before, and they're not even looking for the attention. They're not talking. And it's just like, you just start to see like this, what is going on over there? Like, what are they doing? And they're doing it efficiently, and they're doing it right. But I think that when you bring up, like when we talk about the Mad Max thing, it reminds me, if the frequency is changing, we have to remember that this moment of right now with the frequency we've been in for so long won't be the same. So it's almost like sailing. The winds are going to be a different way they hit the sail. So it's almost like, well, everybody sails so good right now, I will never be able to do it. But when that energy comes in, you know, it's going to be a different way that we feel literally in the world. Like, it'll be all about feeling. It'll be all about, so we can't take things from the cross of planning at all. Like, the stories, and it's not going to work. So even the Mad Max theory of how it would look is what people go to in their survival bunkers right now, and all that stuff. But the energy will be a completely different frequency, to where you can't even, we're meant to respond in the moment. We're not supposed to have it so figured out
mentally, strategically, seven-centeredly. And a lot of the points that we've brought up tonight keep bringing my attention to how we've had Pluto in gate 60 for the last year, basically. And this is going to be strongly featured through 2025. And gate 60 is really elegant in that it shows us that the first step to transcendence is accepting the limitation. It's not trying to outsmart the limitation. It's not trying to mastermind a way for there to be no limitation. The new creative process for how we're going to innovate into this new generation is by accepting the way things are in front of us, and knowing that we will be able to make lemonade out of these lemons if we trust in that inner authority and stop trying to fight the program from what it organically is trying to do, which is show us a new way.
Right. But it makes me wonder, because when we got to this gate last time was the Revolutionary War, right? And it was actually saying, you know what? We are done with being taxed too much. We are done with being used. We are done with your outer authority. We're taking our own authority because of what you're going too far. There are limitations, and you can't do this to people. And it was making lemonade out of lemons. Like, it was it was converting merchant ships and trading ships into warships. It was getting normal people that were farmers and stuff and giving them a gun and being like, welcome to the army today. You know, so it is that kind of like, if I think of the climate we're in right now in the world, and there's just been this like overreach in so many different areas, it will be the things that have gone too far, that haven't honored the understanding of where the limitations are, that are going to just start.
The first things to plummet.
First things to fall.
Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've channeled since, you know, a while now, is that anything that's not really aligned with the intelligence of the planet, you know, Gaia's true design, her grand design, those are going to be the things that have to be burnt down as the phoenix rises, because they're not in congruence with how things need to be in order to allow them to continue to grow and develop and expand. And that's what this really all is about. You know, it's about our continual expansion as beings, as a consciousness, as a potential. So we're getting our toys taken away, we're getting the training wheels taken off, and in that acceptance of that perhaps challenge or that limitation, we have so much room to grow and to mutate into new forms.
Because that's really what it's about, is the mutation of the switch between frequencies, the switch between, it reminds me in astrology, when I look at somebody's chart, or even on my own, when in progression, you go through a progressed sun changing signs. It's a mutation and it feels crazy. I don't care who you are. When your progressed sun moves into a new sign, you're born, whatever sign you are, but depending on how old you are, you will get to the moment where your sun will move into a new sign before 30 years old. It will happen. And if you look at that 1 to 2 years of the last year in your own sign and moving to the next sign are fucking insane. It feels like, I always say, it's like, oh, you were MTV, now you're the 700 Club. You know, like if it's, you know what I mean? Like
right.
It's that extreme where it's like, I've never been in this energy. It's a mutation that you must go through. And it actually feels very difficult because you want to hold on to the energy of what you were.
Yeah. I can remember when my progressed sun, you know, was moving into Aries from me being a Pisces my whole life. And, you know, looking at that even through the human design lens, which I know very well, and seeing, oh, my son's going into the 25th gate of innocence and universal love. But the experience I was having of that did not feel like innocence or universal love. It just felt like anything but that. Just disjointed, uncomfortable, and just confusing. So that's probably par for the course as well.
I mean, that's probably what it feels like, the mutation of a caterpillar to a butterfly. It's probably chaotic, the whole, like, it's not like I think there's a conscious moment of the mind of a butterfly going, it's my time to go. It just kind of happens.
Yeah.
And they say if you try to help a butterfly out, they don't make it.
Right, because that's your mind's imposition into an intelligence that is not mental.
Right, and it's the response or the authority and the strategy of the butterfly to naturally have that its own will force of doing it, so it will fly. So it's kind of interesting to me because it's like we have to go through those metamorphosis more, you know, on our own, and we're doing that as a collective, we're doing that as a galaxy, we're doing that as an Earth, we're doing that as a solar system, we're doing that on every level, and Gaia's involved too. I think that's the whole part, is that's where you see Gaia not feeling the same, because it's preparing itself. It is a being on its own. It has a soul of its own. And it's got its own monopole. And it's a big one. It makes our monopole seem really small.
More like, you know, mini poles, yeah.
Mini poles, yeah. And it literally is connected to higher monopoles that are in a galactic system and in a multiverse. That it's almost like, I don't know if we would have the capability yet, but maybe we will near the end of this, where the last bit of the great, you know, distribution of information and stuff would be that we would see that the whole multiverse flipped at the same time. Like all the galaxies flipped or something.
It's like a domino.
like all like an Nova events and all these like letting, it's a release party. It really is more of a party at the end. It's like Zion at the end when Morpheus gets up there and says, and I know, his big speech of that we've been fighting for these machines for 100 years, and for 100 years we are still here, and they'll have a big party.
Yeah.
And he gets them over the fear that this is going to be a metamorphosis. This is going to be the most extreme thing that ever happened. But they make it, and then that's the weird part is like, maybe people are going to need to enjoy this ride as long as it is till the moment that it comes with the preparation for it. But don't stop enjoying life either,
Because honestly, death isn't that bad.
No.
And that's what is crippling us in fear and uncertainty. And that's where the not self really hooks in and tries to take control of things out of this, oh my God, I'm going to die. But even that moment of crossing over or releasing the physical body that you've walked in through this life experience, that itself is a celebration. If we can really embrace it with the greater awareness of the bigger picture, it's just changing forms, and that's something to celebrate.
Yeah, and I think it reminds me of like, if we were to use this whole idea of the Illuminati or this other higher authority that people seem to give their whole life to in fear. If they're so based upon the cost of planning, and really the whole idea of Illuminati and all these secret societies and stuff came through this cost of planning, right? That understanding that would mean that they know galactically what's going on. They know earthwise what's going on with the shifting of what's going on frequency-wise. No, you can look at it from scientific to spiritual to human design to astrological to pole shifts to all. You can look at it every way, and it's like, okay, yeah, this is going down. No matter what, okay? Like it's pretty simple. If we're not in any of those things, we don't have all their tools, and we don't have all their shit in their planned world, right? And we can get to that. That means they already got there. But it reminds me of when they're taking these really high-end James Webb telescope energies and everything. It's almost like they are searching for some sort of last bit of answers or truth to store and to hold. It reminds me of the seed vault, right? Or it reminds me of NORAD and how they build in the center of, Colorado. Was like, oh, well, in case, just to be able to bring the military there and keep everything together and keep everybody safe that we want only in our planning circle. It's almost so like they're trying to find some fix that ain't going to happen, or some answer outside that, again, it's giving their authority away,
right?
Which means they're not going to have a ticket to the movie theater if they're so overly lost in trying to find a way to keep it going.
Right. So you're 2 miles underground in a salt cave and you're still playing the cross of planning. That's not much fun. Doesn't sound like much fun.
No, did you ever see Encino Man?
I'm familiar with the story arc.
Yeah, like he was in a bunker because his parents were afraid of the nuclear fallout of the 60s, and so he in Encino, so they went deep down there, and he was born down there, and then he ends up in Beverly Hills and Hollywood in the 90s and has no idea what life's like.
It's like that show Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt. It's actually kind of funny. It's one of the only shows I've ever watched.
Right, but it kind of reminds me of like, or the kind of creepy one was those, I forgot the name of those movies, but they were like, it was John Hudson or whatever, and he was in the underground bunker and keeping nobody go outside yet, and the whole time it's like, are you supposed to go outside? I think it's with I forgot, I don't know the name of those two movies, but they were crazy. But I feel like there might be a lot of people that do go down to the bunkers and try to hold the cross of planning. Like, I want to still live the old reality, and they might go live it in a very sad way, and the frequency won't be carrying that, so they won't even last that long. So I would say right now to all the bunker people out there, don't fall for it, or if you get a ticket to a bunker, that's not the place you want to go.
I think another fascinating thing to consider is that what science is now discovering or realizing is that the ecology of our planet, the ecosystem, is heavily influenced by where our planet is moving through the Milky Way.
Right.
And so as we traverse these new frequencies, which is just basically a new placement in the different bandwidths of the spiral of our galaxy, the ecology itself might respond in ways that we're not expecting.
Right.
Meaning that, you know, all these people could be going down in these bunkers and eating their canned foods. And meanwhile, on the surface, there's a whole new burst of nature's fertility and her ability to grow new forms that are even more nourishing or beautiful or protective or just abundant in general. And again, because we might be too anchored in the cross of planning in this myopic view that only by depending on ourselves and our strategy can we survive anything, we could miss that there might be this tremendous wave of support from the planet itself to sustain life in a new and different way that maybe is much more grounded or more simpler or more organic. But
yeah, banana trees could just start popping up in the desert.
Cactus fruit could start getting really juicy.
It's interesting if we show this. This article came out when I've been doing a lot of the galactic flip stuff, but they say that the end of the Neanderthals was linked to flip of Earth's magnetic poles. And if you think of that, it would be in the evolution of the species, not the end. So it's like so funny how cross planning is always like at the end of something that it's like, no, it's like that means that we ended our Neanderthal life. Like it's kind of like the same thing if the raves are coming, right? Yeah, bummer. Thank God I'm not sitting here as a Neanderthal with you. But I think it's also a good graphic of understanding the cosmic rays or even just the plasmas that we get around the galaxy, or we get from the sun, or we get from the universe itself, that the sun itself kind of clears a lot of that out. But the galaxy itself, if it starts, especially like you said, if we're moving into a different place with the sun and the solar system in it, it starts to come into our field. So it's not only the sun's radiation and all of its plasma and all of its stuff, but it's outside influences, which also makes it a very interesting turn of events where we start getting outer energy in of how to respond to it that's shifting things, and Earth itself is shifting and aligning. But it's very karmic, I feel, or it's very fated. Like it's part of what the Mayans said. Like, you know, like 2012 and their idea of the end of the world wasn't the end of the world physically, but
the end of
vibrationally
time.
And the end of time and the beginning of a new cycle.
And even time is a limitation.
Correct. And those cycles in the galaxy are very, very powerful, which our scientists today know about, but they don't talk about. Or they keep showing, like today it was the doomsday fucking Antarctic shelf is losing so much ice, but they don't show you the other side that's had more ice gain in the last 2 years than all, right? So it's like, and plus the poles are shifting. So it's like they don't give you all the facts. They take like the little thing to keep you in the plan, where you giving us authority. You're giving us authority.
And there's that idea that, you know, the smaller control structures are always kind of mirroring the larger shifts that are happening. And then meanwhile, there's always this sense that no one is given the full download. Like not even Ra was probably given the full download, because if you know too much, that's not a good thing either. That's not actually going to be conducive to evolution. That just feeds the mind's belief that it can control or concoct or, you know, avoid, and that's not what's being asked of us. So it's like even those authorities outside of us that seem to have all the answers, they don't have all the answers. There's no way that anyone on this planet, living or dead, can see beyond a certain threshold, especially knowing that new frequencies are going to be rolling in. New frequencies mean new bandwidths of perception. New bandwidths of perception mean new thresholds of possibility and opportunities for us to create perhaps even newer but maybe more simple technologies technologies that are more attuned to the Earth's natural energies and that harvest things like gravity or, you know, other energies like this that are just inherent to this ride on Earth. And maybe those could be where the solutions that save us, or at least make life livable in a time of great crisis and change, come from. I have a good friend that's very tapped in as a channel and is very connected to the Sirian energy, like Sirius, the star system. And what was revealed to her is that some of these same technologies that allowed the construction of the pyramids, where there's kind of like a levitation kind of energy of being able to lift large things by just attuning certain metallic, you know, almost threads with certain frequencies that allow us to lift things much more than even a machine could. And what are we doing there? We're actually making the technology more subtle and more organically aligned and having a greater effect than anything we can concoct in our own little mental corner, you know?
Yeah, it reminds me of somebody who's prepping too hard to where they would go get, I need to have 8 construction big trucks that have lifts on them and all these things. And I need to have this and this. But when we get to it, it's like, that's not necessary. And I could have been doing so much more, or I could have been enjoying my life more, or I could have put that energy into something else in my life, right? Because I don't even need any of this. This stuff's all just going to be thrown in the junk right now. Like, or anybody want a piece of this? No, we're levitating it. You know, it's like
exactly.
It's like, well, I guess I'll use it for, I don't know, a great lookout for sunsets that might be looking different. I mean, everything.
And
we don't know
if we have like massive, you know, geoelectric events when the nodes move back into Aquarius, which will be in 2027, and we've done all of this armament with these old technologies that run on electricity, and then all those grids get blown out, all those circuits get blown out, what's going to be left is only the potentials of organic technologies and energy. So
yeah, that's why I think it would be, and I know this might sound, I'm not like joking, I'm actually saying for real, like I think it's good time for people to get an old typewriter and take, like, that's what my family did with all the old family history, the books from the 1600s. Like, thank God my great aunt got out a typewriter and typewritten it all out before the book really started to get unlegible to read, because the ink goes bad, the pages, my families had to keep those books in like airtight cases. So in the 60s, that's what she did. And I have all the binders of them, right? So it's like the idea that I'm just going to store everything on the computer of truth, because I feel like in 2027, with the nodes coming into Aquarius, the North Node, and when you think about the last time the North Node was in Aquarius, which was at the end of the 2000s into the 2010s, right? Which is ironic because that's kind of the same cycle with Jupiter right now, is that we're going to get unplugged from the internet. The internet's going to not be a home anymore. It's not going to be a place, especially based off where it's going and where we're going astrologically. And even by that point, Pluto exiting out of the 60th gate and in Aquarius into a realm to where you have to remember, in America during that time, while the war was happening, we got to a place to where we didn't even know what we were going to be. Right? Like we had this Declaration of Independence. We had some Articles of Confederation drafted, but when it actually came to the end of the war, it was, we need to all go talk about this. And is this what we're really doing? You know what I mean? It was like
back to the drawing
board, and then a debate about the Constitution, and then creating a Constitution. And I feel that if you have records, if you have things in life, go print them physically. Mm-hmm. Pictures you like. Go
print out your human design.
Go print. I have it right behind me. So it's like, you know, thanks, Elizabeth. She's probably in here, but she actually gave me that for my birthday.
Great gift.
It was like the coolest gift. I was like, holy shit.
We were all like, what?
Yeah, we were like, what? It was an awesome gift. But that's the, I think it's an important, I know it sounds stupid, but I actually think it's something that in all of our history, no matter what cross we're in or no matter what frequency we're in, our human species has done, right? Like, it's more of a physical to pass things on that are important to us. And I feel like we've actually given too much authority to the outside cloud systems to hold our info, the internet to hold our info, our phones to hold our favorite memories, all these things outside, which I'm lucky that my family did all that and have worked tirelessly throughout the centuries to do that. But it makes me go, when I look at all I have and all the stuff I've done, man, I got to find a way to get all the stuff that I want to wear, whatever I want to. And again, it's one of those things where it's like, there's that restriction where it's like, you can't take it all.
Yeah.
You know, but the stuff that's the most relevant stuff. And I think that a typewriter, and I think that having, you know, printing out your pictures. I mean, it's crazy if you think about how the system was falling, but looking like it was going forward, like the end of 24-hour photos or 1 hour photos, or the end of like the telephones that were based upon an actual system that could survive through the power outages, right? We used to be able to, if the power went out, you could still use your telephone, right? Like the last payphones have been taken out all over America. So, you know, if you really think about it, you better start having some stuff back in your life that's the simple stuff. It's not about a fear thing, but stuff that we've always had, that we will continue to have, and that move forward into this new energy. And like that, you don't need to take much more than what's the most basic necessities. I don't think that you need to freak out and have too much. It's definitely where you want to respond to the new video game, like any new video game, where you start at the very beginning and it's not like you have a lot. And that's where I think like the fear, or people can project on you and me, well, they're now saying the points of what the WEF is saying, that you'll have nothing and like it. Right? I feel that projection, because that's the irony of what the dark is doing, right? Is like anybody saying the same tune in a galactic way is now going to be associated with that. Which automatically is going to make people question it, make people get crazy about it. But when it's like, yo, go listen to people who have not been part of any of that have been saying this stuff. Go listen to the ancients who have been saying this for a long time, and not in their way, not saying like, and you'll like it and you'll eat crickets. And we're not saying that. And we're not trying to make an enterprise off crickets like they are. Right? Like that's the stuff people don't read between the lines enough. And that's the other part of where people are really lost, I feel, right now, is like, again, giving this authority to this outside shit.
It also brings to mind the fact that a lot of us are already carrying the rave architecture in pieces. And when we look at a human design body graph, this is looking at the variable, which is kind of the substructure beneath the surface of the body graph. And we can see, you know, where we stand in this evolutionary arc between leftness and rightness. Now, this is not somebody's body graph. This is just the transits of the moment. But even here near the head center and the crown of the ajna, we can see,
is it a reflector right now?
It is. And so we can see that even this imprint right here has rightness to it. It's got a right cognition, or a passive cognition, and a passive awareness. So what does that mean? It means that people with these right arrows, they can be on either the left, which is the design side, the body, or the right on the conscious side. They have attributes to the way that they process information that means that they have almost unlimited capacity for storage. So there are people all around us, it could be even you, that have this capacity to hold deeply encoded information beyond the scope of what your conscious mind is capable of knowing in each moment. And that we act as resources. So while many of the external, storage units, whether it's the internet or the cloud or whatever, that we're keeping all these records and all this information of how to do things and the different modalities and tools, there's all these human beings around the world that have this information stored within them. And that's why it's really important, I think, also to embody, and find what really lights you up and excites you in terms of skills and pursuits, right, and even, histories and different timelines of knowledge, and to really deeply absorb that, embody it in your aura, in your DNA, because then it's there as a record that can be called out of you by the right people. And if you're in your authority and you're in that navigation mode from the form and not just the mind, you're going to be brought into connection and cooperation with people that need what you have stored in you, even if it doesn't seem useful to you right now, and that they have what you need as well in terms of information, know-how, skills. And so even in this, we can see that nature or Gaia, or just like the collective consciousness, has already been actively preparing for this shift for quite some time, even since 1781, when we started to be these nine-centered bodies and have this more receptive potential. So like my right-mindedness, this is not my chart again, but I do have a right mind and a right awareness. That's where this depth of knowledge about human design is stored, and it gets pulled out of me uniquely by each person that comes in front of me and has a different chart or a different question.
Right.
So that could be this, the same story with somebody that knows electrical engineering or mechanics or building structures or, crop farming and agriculture and sustainability and all these things. So that's where the future of all this information is. I think, physical records and keeping that continuity of our lineage is super important as well. But we've also got it in our consciousness cloud system.
Yeah, it's like the spoken word is going to be the way to pass the information on the most. I mean,
Again.
It kind of is how the story of Jesus 325 years later came to Constantine, was a bunch of people kept and held the knowledge. There was only so many scrolls that were really left.
Yeah.
And a lot of the information of Jesus came through people in their channeling, in their dreams, or whatever they were embodied in with it. So it is kind of moving back to that. It is moving back to that. But
and
it's
without so much external noise, it's much easier to tap into that knowingness, that awareness, that, encoded experience and knowledge that is literally in the genius of your genes. So it's like, without so much external distraction of the screens and the so-called, advancedness of this technology, that inner technology, which it's all based on us anyway, we are the primary technology. All these systems are just copies of different microcosms of our own systems. These can come more fully online, and that might be what the frequencies that are rolling in as the wheel turns support, that we might actually feel and experience these deeper cognitive capacities come more online as we get hit by these new frequencies and vibrations. So the stuff that may have been laying dormant in our consciousness is suddenly, it's external. It's more not externalized, but so much more just palpable and able to be accessed, essentially.
And grounded in connection to your true self and the energies that are true. So it's like a conduit. It's like making the conduit stronger, I feel, in yourself, because we're conduits to the energy.
And if our internal frequency is at a certain bandwidth that's actually quite high, but the external background frequency is a little bit lower than that, we're not going to be able to reach the true heights of our cognition. And so when that gets cleared out, we can finally like almost breathe in our consciousness, and then we have so much more access to what we need. And that's
it almost is like expanding the auric field within yourself, because you're generating more of that auric field, because you're more in tune with the truth of yourself, that you attract more into your life.
And that's how we will actually build and create. And that's how the raves will build and create, through direct manifestation, through a process that we would call, from this perspective, like attracting something or manifesting something.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I've been in a relationship now for a couple of weeks, and of course there was, some time before that, but like the made it official, right? And I've been so much more grounded by my focus on what my main things are in my life to respond to, instead of, well, what else in the world is out there, right? There's too much with social media. I haven't been on my social media much. I'm banned from lives on Instagram. I'm banned from being tagged, so I'm not getting as many DMs of tagging, and I just have just like let go, because I don't feel a big response to it, except for to put out this kind of info, and that's it. But I have felt so much more grounded and so much less noise and so much less, I can't even describe it, but I just feel a lot more in tune.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's a lot more clarity and a lot more to enjoy in my life. People are probably wondering why I had Backstreet Boys on my story today. because I was having fun with my girlfriend. We were laughing for hours about it. That's love, though. When we can get back to those places, there's so much more than you think. It's almost like the cross of planning created this idea of what you get to, and it'll all be there. When really,
yeah,
having fun with my girlfriend, singing with my foot, Backstreet Boys, The One, has given me more life than so many things I've tried to set into the idea of what the plan was supposed to be for life itself, the idea of it.
That's wisdom.
Backstreet Boys, The One. You know, but yeah. And it reminds me of a time before that North Node came into Aquarius. When I think of the 2000s, when I even think of the 90s, and I think of this more calm sense with the earth, other people, and life itself. It didn't feel so disconnected, but really it's that we're disconnecting by getting lost in the planning and trying to hold on to the planning cross. The more we let that go and we get back to the moment and we get back to these beautiful, loving places, that's my strategy and authority, is just to respond. And I'm not here to think. I'm not here to think. I'm not here to try and figure it all out. And it's like, that's all I have to do.
Yeah. Thank you for role modeling that for us. Even though
I'm not a 6 yet, or won't be.
But your nodes are.
Oh, that's true. But I guess, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I just kind of feel like it's just been a really beautiful, it's been the most beautiful experience of my life in the last 2 weeks. And it's funny because it's kind of like most people would be like, are you sure? You know, I'm like, no, I've had to actually, like, that's actually the response that's true.
Right. And it's all about the energy, and that doesn't lie.
It doesn't lie. And it's like been the most peaceful I've felt in my life. I'm like, everything okay? You almost trip out because you're waiting for some bad thing to happen when really it's going, no, there's not. And that's where I will be honest, I've had a little bit of like, not an issue, but whether or not maybe it's the one line in me, right? The suspicion. I need to get to the factual information of, can we transcend the transits of the planets through human design and our strategy and authority? Especially collectively, I've been more focused on than my own self. I feel like in myself, yes, I've been able to kind of like, okay, I'm prepared. I know, fuck, this is going to be hard. Fucking Uranus opposed my Mars. Like Saturn square oppose my Venus, Uranus square my Venus. Like all through 2021, Shadow Reality hit my Venus hard. Like, and I lost my dad, and I lost all these things, right? And people and situations and subscribers and money and all these things. I was able to get through all that by just following that. But when it comes to the collective, I've had this, because that's out of my hands, because the collective is all going to respond into its own way. And I feel that individually, if people do really find their strategy and authority, especially because the astrology is going to get wilder. The human design shows as we are exiting this cross of planning to the sleeping phoenix, it's getting extreme. The galactic science itself, the earth science, the sun science is getting crazy, but that doesn't mean it has to be crazy. It really, and honestly, I feel like it's important because a big part of tonight's show was about positioning yourself for the movie, that you can't stop it. And as Ra says, the idea of that you're going to figure out how to save the world is insanity, because that's not why we're down here, and that's not what this life's about. And that there's too many things that are falling down anyway to even be able to do that. The way that the institutions are crumbling, and the way, it's like, you don't want to get caught up in, it reminds me of like a Knight of Swords running towards a tower card. Like, I can figure it out, and I'll figure out how to save this tower from falling. It's like, God, that would be hectic. That would not be fun in this energy.
That's like the imposed God complex of the cross of planning mixed with the strategic mind. thinking that we all need to be this communal messiah saving everyone from, in a sense, the inevitable forces of change.
Right.
Which is an expression of divine order.
And false prophets or false idols. Right?
You said it.
Because the false prophets have been the idols of Fauci and even Biden as of the last week. Which it was funny because we did the show and then the next day the whole Biden speech happened, and it was interesting because it was an interesting speech of, no matter what you think politically, it was just a speech of saying these people are the worst people, and really saying, again, it's the they, the we, the da 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 da, where that's not the way to kind of look at things, like right now we shouldn't be worried about people. Everybody, look at every nation right now. Every nation is going through the end of society's normal planning cross. Every single one. So it's almost kind of like this weird thing where it's like, why are people so worried about the other instead of themselves? That's where we can get lost, because I feel like if we try to save others in our personal lives, if we try to push too much authority outside to these people being the bad ones, because if you think about the story of like the light and the dark, and if we're on the light team and they're on the dark team, if you're really in the light team, you're not going to have to do an attack. You're only here to respond to however your auric field is. And if they come at you, you'll know at the moment of how to respond. You're not here to be on offense. The way that the universe works is it's coming at us. It's not us charging through the galaxy, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
It's
not really up to us.
No, and not. I mean, and I think it's better that we get to watch and respond to it than have to think about all that crazy shit and all that. Like that's a higher power of the divine of God that's so beautifully already been figured out that we don't have to do that. And we didn't sign up to do that.
Right.
We didn't sign up to say, move over, God. Move over. I know how to do this one better.
And that's, really owning the beauty of your seat in the theater, is to know that you're here to watch and see it unfold, and to accept only responsibility for that which you can truly respond to. And over and above that, it's all mind. And the mind is inherently insecure and inherently always trying to prove its power and its control over the reality, which makes us all into little petty tyrants trying to control the universe. And then we miss the beauty of the movie in doing so. And that is the real tragedy.
Right. And, it's funny when we talk about auric fields, because I feel like when we think of it from just like Earth's perspective, right? It's like we have them on Earth. Like Earth Soul's auric field is going to respond to the energies that it's receiving from the outside universe itself.
Right.
And that's what all these cycles are. So when you think it's what people are doing that are causing it, I think that there's some part of it, but it would be the energy, not so much the physicality of it. I think that though that this is where so many in our science community, or so many people are getting giving the authority to, I hate to say it, but like our own species as so powerfully the ones that are creating the atrocities, when really it's not such an atrocity. It's the end of a cycle. It's the end. It's the only way that we can evolve. And when you learn to accept that, and I think there's too many religious overtones.
Right.
That even if somebody's not religious and they claim to be, I'm atheist, right? There's still
control
system built in that for them to be the opposition to it, if that makes sense. That there's too much in the Christian community, there's too much in all these, and even in Buddhism and all these other places where they're all, the end of Pisces is the end of Pisces of an age. The end of this cycle is the end of this cycle. And really, if you think of the religions, they really did not have a lot of power until they were able to get things like planning and informational false illusionary truth on people, and that's where I think it gets weird, because the game, when did it start? 15
15 16 15
Oh, 16 15, yeah. So right in that cycle, you have to remember is when King James has come out with the King James version of the Bible, right? That has hit people in English for the first time. You had to go to a church to hear any word of God or any divinity, and they spoke in Latin, and all the priests were able to read Latin and translate it into English. 1620 is when the pilgrims go, I'm out of here. We don't want to have to follow this. But it's kind of an interesting kind of, element of like, yeah, we don't want to follow that plan, and then it's like, you see anybody following their authority now in society being, and since then, being, they're bad, like you're bad for going off the plan. It's like they scare kids today, right? Like if you don't go to college, you're not going to be a good person. You're not going to make it. You're only going to make this much money. You're only going to go this far in life. If you don't have this job, if you don't reach that position, if you don't know how to prove yourself to your family by your job, and this goes into even like our cultures, because it's going to be a culture change as well. Like the idea of people in the East thinking a certain way all the time, the people of the West certain all the time. There's way more common thread right now as a humanity of all of us seeing that all the systems of the world are falling apart, that has no cultural overtone to it, right? That we all can see the same sun, we can all see the same moon, we can all see the same environment and frequency. And so, but I this is where maybe I think the work I've done with astrology and the ages and this that aligns with the human design is that it really is the age of deception ending. And it really is based upon the religious, institutional, giving the authority to that. If I don't do this and if I don't do that, then I'm not going to a good place, which is also a created place.
Right. Back in yoga school, the contrast that they gave between the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius was that age of Pisces was to be or not to be. Meaning if you didn't give your heart and your soul over to a particular externalized authority or creator or whatever, then you weren't valid in the eyes of society. You weren't valid in the eyes of God, and you weren't going to make it. And yet in the age of Aquarius, it's switching to be, which is just to exist, to be conscious, to be here is all that you need.
And that's why I think the idea of Aquarius being that it's not just an idea, but it actually is the water bearer. And people always associate Aquarius with a water sign, which is interesting because it's not. It's an air sign, but it's one of those interesting things that it is bearing water. And to me, we were laughing earlier. It's like, is he just pouring water to wash his feet for himself? You don't see a row of people. You don't know where it's going. And Aquarius is so given this whole idea of the collective. But I think that the end of the cross of planning with having Pluto coming into Aquarius, having Saturn, Jupiter that met, is the shadow of our collective, the shadow of our society, the shadow of the idea of what brings us all together. And the only way to get rid of the shadow is to literally unplug from the Piscean kind of overtones and the religious overtones and the illusionary stuff to wake us up. That's the shock. The shock of Aquarius is going to be the opposite of what you think is going to be and how it should look. The Jetsons life will not happen. The Star Wars will not happen. The, you know, all those things, and where we always think the iPhone won't make it to being the way we think it will. The, you know, we're seeing the peak. I mean, even the fact that they did the iPhone 14 today, and it's like, wow, this is the 14th one. And you finally have decided to have the display that will stay on and show you some sports scores.
Revolutionary.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying is
Maybe.
and that it's going to connect to a satellite in case cell phone towers go down. That's some weird virtue signaling, not in the weird woke sense, but in
Consumer.
systems are going to be going down.
Mm-hmm.
And you can pay, starting in November with Apple, unless you buy an iPhone 14 Max Pro Max, a monthly service to be able to get emergency services by satellite when cell towers go down that connect through Elon Musk and his Starlink.
Yeah, I even saw a couple months ago, they're like demoing a new service in LA called Citizen, which is basically a subscription-based law enforcement. So even preparing for the end of, you know, subsidized governmental law enforcement, and just, oh no, you can Netflix it basically so that you can have someone that will show up for you, because societally it just won't be.
But I'm trying, you know what's funny about that? When I think about that, if it actually got to that, they're going to be like, hey, I got to watch over my own shit right now. I can't go to that person. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'm quitting.
Right.
We were actually just talking before this about jobs we ever like left when we were younger.
Yeah.
Like, it's almost like it's going to get to that point to where it's like, again, that's part of the whole process of planning, right?
Yeah, the actual motivation
Right.
of people to keep up these systems is going to just be unplugged. It's not that it's necessarily going to be a this or that external thing that makes it all come crashing down. It's like the energy that we've been pumping up, you know, that's been pumping us up to maintain these bargains is just going to wilt. And what's going to replace it is me, mine, focusing on my energy, my sovereignty, my ability to respond in the moment, to empower myself at any cost.
So you know how there's been an attack on the ego for so long, right?
Mm-hmm.
In that new cross, it would be the attack on, you're being too collective, bro.
Right.
You're being too equitable. And it's so funny because we're seeing the peak of this cross and the way that the collective wokeism has reached its kind of insanity, right? Without thinking of the limitations. And that's what's going to fall right away. The first thing. Mm-hmm. The first thing that's going to fall is all the collectivism that's going on. The wokeism is going to, and that's maybe the irony of how this destiny is working out. That the end of the cycle is really, if you think of the we to the me, if we take it as simple complex, and you see the we being touted on, gosh,
Yeah.
everything so much. And gosh, I used an example with Brian on Monday. I was like, I mean, in the astrology community, they're trying to say this, we need to have more of this race of astrologers on boards and I'm like, that's like saying in astrology, like, you know what, we need more blue. So let's grab Neptune and bring it closer to the sun. What is that going to do? It's going to disturb the system of natural order or response. Or does Neptune want to go there? Like, it's almost like people trying to take authority over other people and finding this, I feel like I'm part of the cross of plan. I have figured out the planning better, and I know how to make everything work better. Like, this is where you can't be the savior of other people that might not even want to be saved either. Or even if they do want to be saved,
May not even understand that that's what you're trying to do.
right?
Because they're too woke.
But I think that's what's the most interesting is I know that a lot of people are either in that, like, oh my gosh, yes. Or there's a lot of people right now going, this is lunacy, because they're already kind of edging into that new frequency that's already starting up, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like, these frequencies don't start up like in 1 millisecond, and then the other one stops in 1 millisecond. They're overtoned on each other, and they're overlapping, and they're at cusps.
Yeah.
And so we bleed into one as we are exiting another. Mm-hmm. And so people are, and that's what's kind of ironic about these times, is like the energy that is being hereticked at the most and burned at the stake is the one that we're going into.
And that's just how the skepticism of collective energy works. The collective only wants tried and true solutions that have been proven through logic. If it challenges that existing order, it needs to be repeated and again and again for the collective to finally open up to it as a viable solution. That's literally the baseline circuitry of collective energy. Same thing with tribal. Both the collective and the tribe aren't that open to new things, to the mutative, to the individual. So these individual energies that are coming through that have a mind of their own and a style of creation all their own are just simply not going to be accepted into these rigid logical structures of collective and tribal systems.
And it blows my mind that through this cross of planning, like if you see communism or you see socialism, have never worked, right? They've always been the biggest failures. They've always been the biggest in history of whenever it's tried, it ends up being a dictator that takes over, and it ends up being great world wars over all this stuff. So it's kind of weird that even in the plan really never worked, or it never does. Mm-hmm. Like, that's the funny part to me, is like it's almost been like a big part of the illusionary element that is going to be what truth is realizing that we don't need to rely on a collective structure that's not built that is built outside of us, like that we all are coming together and all on a similar page, where it's much more like there's a natural order of the earth and how it works. It's not like the deserts are screaming at the forests and saying, you need to stop there. Like it just, they naturally go, yep, okay, we're the forest. I'm a tree. I'm done here. And the sand's like, yeah, I'm done here. I don't want to go into the forest too much. Like it naturally happens,
Yeah. And when we think of like the actual mechanics of these crosses, which you just made me think of, it's quite fascinating because the cross of planning is maintained by a connection between the will center and the emotions. Neither of these are consistent in nature. The willpower center is here to work in order to be done with the job and then rest. It is not a sustainable energy. It's motorized, it's powerful, it can push through resistance, it can push through even its own discomfort with what it's doing, but it does have to stop and rest regularly or it will completely burn out and oftentimes cause death. The solar plexus is cyclical in nature and has no continuity in terms of a logical plan working out the way we thought it was going to. It's got a mind of its own, and it's going through these emotional cycles that eventuate at a certain kind of clarity, but it's not clear truth. So all of these plans of the cross of planning have been this battle for the will and the emotions to come into congruence with each other, but neither of them are consistent in nature. So the plan always does kind of fail because there's no consistent staying power. Yet, when we move to the cross of the sleeping phoenix, we can see that the channel that defines this upcoming cycle is one of consistent power because it's connected to the sacral. And the sacral is the life force center that naturally regenerates itself, especially when that energy is given and used for things that are in alignment with the greater template of the individual. So we might find that even though all of this external support and all these, hand-holding and bargains and, all the promises and contracts and even the contract and the agreements that are represented by money and currency, not consistently sustainable. But when we move into...
Never has been through history either. The same thing, inflation, and then moving in.
Cyclical.
Yeah, exactly. Rome did the same thing, crash and burn. Oh yeah, no, let's start biting the tip. Take your coin and bite the part of it and here's a bit of a coin. And that's where the idea of Bitcoin even comes from. Like, it's crazy.
Yeah. And it's just continuous disintegration into less and less pure form, because there's no sustaining energy. It's the same pool of energy that we started the cycle with in 1615 that's just been trickled down, trickled down, trickled down. And we've perceived it as growing, but the only way that it's grown is through perception of the narrative, not actual growth, except for in our populace. It's allowed us to have confidence in procreating and creating more humans, which are the actual energy source, which are the actual generators of this reality and of all these systems. So as we move into the sleeping phoenix, we can see that we might actually have a lot more sustainable energy as a collective. The background frequency is going to essentially be telling everybody's template, you're a manifesting generator. So even the projectors and the reflectors out there are going to have a kind of manifesting generator overlay to them.
Right.
And it's not saying that they're going to have the same amount of consistent energy as a generator would, but it is saying that something about what we're moving into is a lot more organically consistent. And that's fascinating to think about.
I was going to say, because it feels like when you show the cross of planning one, it's the idea of consistency by me showing up at 8 a.m. and me being there till 6 p.m. And then I go to sleep at the exact same time and I wake up at the same time, which is not natural, especially for the generating energy, right? It's supposed to you're supposed to fully exhaust yourself, but not from a place of frustration. Mm-hmm. And when I think of it moving into the new cross, and since you and I both have that same channel, mm-hmm. It's funny because we don't, on this show, there's no set time. Mm-mm. It's when you and and Brian asked, when are you guys ready to go? I'm like, I don't know. Like, fine. Like, we didn't even trip. We were just like having interesting convos, talking about things. And then when it feels right, we do it, but we're consistent.
Yeah.
It's organically consistent. Mm-hmm. And that's what's been tripping people out about like the work that you and I do in this spiritual community. I see a lot more people on YouTube. They're doing their videos at like 1 a.m, a tarot video, or because it's not that energy of
conducive to actual creativity.
Correct. Yeah. But it makes me a little sad of thinking of how many people are stuck in that old cross. Because I remember when I got out of the job market, it took me 6 weeks where every morning I woke up like, I need to be somewhere, or I feel like I'm not in the right place. I'm doing something wrong.
Yeah.
And that's a hard thing to get over. It doesn't take a day. It doesn't take a week. It takes time. And you have to learn to then organically be okay with waking up and feeling like I'm not a piece of shit because I'm not doing something right now mm-hmm. that I slept in till 10 a.m. or I slept in till noon right now.
Yeah.
Like there's that programming, that hardwiring of like, I have to show up. And if I got to go to the gym at 6 a.m., I got to do, and it's like, it seems like way more stress to the system mm-hmm. than a friend that naturally might call me like, hey, you want to go to the gym? You know what? Yeah, fuck it. like not having such a planned out life. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the idea of the calendar system too. I feel like that's going to be the thing that's going to trip people out the most, because the idea of time, I feel, is what planning is, right?
Yeah.
And when you think of the calendar system, and especially the Julian calendar system that turned to the Gregorian in this planning cycle, which was based upon that whole channel that you just showed between that what's the will, but the heart, but what is that? The will, is that considered mm-hmm. the will center, right? To the solar plexus. People are going to have to let go of like, is it Sunday today? Is it 6 a.m.? It's on Sunday. Are we all doing that at this moment? It's like, it doesn't matter.
It never really did.
And it never really did. And I'm just going to maybe speak for you, or you could speak for yourself on this one. People like you and me have been living this way for a long time, and it has been way more efficient and I guess we have that channel that's coming mm-hmm. in us. And that's where charisma comes from. Like, if it's not charismatic, ain't going to do it.
Right.
And I'm actually excited for a place where people can live in a charisma, and seeing the smile on people's faces is something that will bring me more joy in life than I got. For a while I got a lot of people pissed at me because I was like, get off this whole, like, it's got to be on this moment at this time and this. It's so not in alignment with Gaia, is what I've always said, the calendar system and the time mm-hmm. system. It's not, like, Like last night I was on a podcast and the moon left, Capricorn, it was right off course, and then went into Aquarius, and that's when the convo got real weird and interesting and crazy, So it's like, it's like everybody has in life these times, like, okay, I got to be doing this at this time. And it's like, but what's your natural time organically that you'll be to respond and do your best at, And
sometimes a lot of times your mind doesn't know when that is. It's about letting your energy actually show up the way that it can and it wants to. And that means that they say that it's not truly charisma unless it's for the greater good. But when you really dissect that statement, the greater good isn't necessarily the tribal rendition of the greater good, which means, it's better for everyone. The greater good is the greater divine order. The greater good is that you're in alignment with what you are and who you are, and that puts you in alignment with all that is. So in order for it to be charismatic, we have to take ourselves out of that cross of planning mentality and realize that the greater good is you at your highest alignment. And that's going to look very different from person to person. That's going to show up maybe even very differently from day to day. And the more that you're curious enough and available enough to explore that, that's when you're really co-creating with the universe in a really pure way. And that's where the best things come from. That's where the most original innovations come from. That's where we get moved forward and mutated into something greater, is when we have that X factor of cosmic originality working with us, as opposed to sticking to some timetable that's more about self-sacrifice than it is about true creation.
It reminds me of the shot over the last couple of years, right? The greater good was to get it. And the idea that if you get it, you're doing the greater good, and the charisma that was built around that. And if Brian could show my screen, please. Exactly a year ago to this moment was when Jimmy Kimmel went on TV and said people who are unvaccinated should not get ICU beds in hospitals, and was making little charismatic jokes about that and saying, right now, if somebody comes to a hospital and it's like, yep, you're vaccinated, guess what? You can just walk on in here, no problem. You need a heart surgery? You're unvaccinated? Go back to eating your Cheetos and you can just die. That's literally what he said exactly a year ago to right now, this moment. And that plan of charisma for the greater good, not only the idea of it is being inversed on people the incorrect way. Like you just described it in the actual way that the greater good really is, not this other way. And so it's been really interesting to see that people are living a false charismatic...
Homogenized charisma.
Homogenized charisma. That's like a word I wouldn't use. That's why I love you on the show. Whereas like I'm just like going to throw out, look at this piece of shit. Right? Like I can't even or here's what he said. In his opening monologue, Jimmy Kimmel had blunt comments about those who are unvaccinated. Vaccinated person having a heart attack? Yes, come right in. Unvaccinated guy who's gobbled horse goo? Rest in peace, Wheezy.
Hilarious.
That's the planning cross at its finest, which is really sad.
At its most, pathetically uncharismatic.
Correct.
Who's watching this?
Believe it or not, a lot of people who got that do watch that.
Right. Well, yeah, and he's kind of giving them that tribal, hug of like, good job, you're being a part of the tribe. Your sacrifice is appreciated.
I remember, if you just take a year ago to right now in this moment, I mean, what a different world. And we're out of that world. It's kind of the same thing of what we're about to go through, but on a much more extreme scale, right? Like now we can throw this up and people actually go, that's pretty fucked up. But if I would have thrown this up a year ago, people would have been like, he's right.
Fun fact, after I taught my first ever human design workshop in person, I went across the street to get lunch and Jimmy Kimmel was there at the restaurant. Super random.
Fun fact, the biggest reality show I ever did, True Beauty, right when a week before it aired, one of the hosts, Vanessa Manillo, now Lachey.
Oh yeah, I remember her.
Went on the show to talk about, because it was an ABC show. And so Jimmy Kimmel went to my name, and the videos, of course, all over the place where he wrecked me and said that I'm a horrible, like an astrologer's a bullshit artist. And then she went on to say that he said that in his stars that he's going to win. And it was weird because I was thinking of the long game. Like, I'm going to win because I'm going to use the show to be in the press, to be a celebrity astrologer. It's never been done before.
Yeah.
And she went, I don't think he's going to have a very long career. And wrecked me and said that, you know, astrology is not real. And they used the whole point of the show to talk about trashing me and trashing astrology, right? Like a 6 minute. So my experience the week before the show was, I'm being trashed by Jimmy Kimmel right now, which I kind of took at a moment of like, this is going to be a really interesting astrology career.
Yeah. But
that's where I'm not even going to say I'm laughing at the end of the day. It's more just like, wow, that's where he ended up. That's where I ended up 12 years later.
Another day in the life of a heretic, just getting burned at the stake for no reason.
He might be one, though. I wouldn't be surprised if he was one. You know, he's a Scorpio, I know that. But that's the interesting thing of where we're at now, is that when you think of everything about being in the movie theater now and what we're seeing, because that's what's weird, is that there's been that being said in the last 2 years, like, get your popcorn. We're all in a movie, and this feels like a movie. I feel like it's so important right now to remember that you're in one and not have to like lose yourself. I remember when that happened, I looked at it like, all right, I'm going to respond to that by just showing that I'm going to do it as far as I can. If I don't have a long career, then I don't. If I do, I do. I don't need to prove myself to them, right? They don't care about me. They're just caring about that moment to get through that show.
Yeah.
They never thought about it ever again, I'm sure. So I think that people have to not let the movie trigger them so hard.
No.
Because there's stuff, you know, it's sad when you watch Disney movies now, or you watch even Gone with the Wind or anything like that. There's all these big things now at the beginning before the movie. This was during a time in which, you know, people thought a different way. It's exactly what's going to be coming. Like, It's like, welcome to the cross of the sleeping phoenix. No longer are people going to be so we, and it's about you now. That time's over. And people are going to be like, what? You know, why were you tripping out about what some movie said the whole time? I mean, and the irony now is you can give books to kids now that have the craziest shit I've ever seen in my life, and literally taking swords to their vaginas and saying, yeah, if you don't want to be a girl, don't be one, and like it's a bad thing. And like they're giving that to kids in classrooms now. Mm. And again, it's a tribal flags, colors of things in life. The mask was a virtue signal of, hey, I know which team you're on. Mm-hmm. We're not going to be in a place where people are even going to give a fuck what your hair color is, what your hair looks like, what team are you on, what flag do you wear, what sports team are you fucking for. Like all these things you can feel have just been going, or you said it best, the flickering of these systems are falling apart. Mm-hmm. Look at the power grid here in California. We got an alert yesterday, like, turn your power off now. And then Newsom in a sweater with a hat on, a sweater. It's fucking 100 degrees plus throughout the whole state. A sweater. Make sure your air conditioning is at 78 degrees. We can do this, California.
Was he at French Laundry again when he said that?
I don't know where he was, but the whole funny thing that's on Twitter about it is, why are you wearing a fucking sweater? You must be in a place where the AC's on way colder than 78 degrees.
It's
like you're wearing a fucking long sleeve sweater. Like, I'm in fucking shorts with fucking, you know what I mean? Like, we're doing this show in the middle of the night and it's fucking hot in here. It's 80 plus at night right now.
It's really hot in here, you guys.
You're wearing a long sleeve, but you're not trying to fucking tell people to fucking cool it down at your house so I can Well, that's weird. He's not saying that. But everybody was like, you ain't turning your restaurants down, and your wife at home definitely is not following that. You know, like that's where all this is going to be, the watching the fall of all those people and those situations, because it's not so much the people, it's what they're connected to in the plan. Mm-hmm. Would you agree with that? Or would you say maybe is
I think
more of the systems and then people who are, I don't know.
I think it's about, if you're really in that comfy theater seat watching the movie, that moments like that are, you know, comedic relief. Because even the offense, or feeling like the offense of like, well, he's not doing it, he's being a hypocrite. It's like, no, that's really just how absurd things are getting. And that's part of the fun, I think. If your heart's in the right place.
It reminds me in tarot when the Tower card moves to the Star card. Because the Tower is all the systems falling and the crown, right? Yeah. And everything falling off, and the lightning bolt that hits the Tower. And then the Star card is so peaceful, and she's alone, but she's really not alone. Because she's connected naked to above, and the nature and the lake and the nature of the stars, and understanding where she's at in the cycle.
She's one with all things, because there's nothing in between her and the universe. And that's what the Tower needed to fall, to remove that middleman between us and our divine nature. So, and
honestly, I think that's what's so beautiful about all these systems. They all give us so much great insight. And in the major arcana and tarot, that switch is the closest, I think, relatable to what we're about to go through.
Yeah.
You know, and you see it with the bleeding over of how many people are getting more into human design, especially. Like, that's the big thing. I see astrology, but again, like I was telling my girlfriend last night, I like TikTok astrology, but I also don't, right? Because it's kind of like, oh, if these people only knew this, right?
Well, that's just entertainment at that point.
Right. Which it's part of it. It's part of getting people into it, so I understand it.
Yeah.
But seeing how many people are getting on to human design, see how many people are even getting on to tarot, that blew up like crazy. But it's like, at least there's people starting to realize they want to understand who they are before the Tower comes, when they're going to need to know it. Because if you don't know it, and you've given yourself up to this whole plan and society, and really the idea of the mass psychosis, right, that's going around, that actually the psychosis is feeling that the Tower will always stay and that the Tower will never fall.
Or that it's always about to fall tomorrow, and that you're in that constant state of fear of when it's going to hit.
That's true too. That's interesting. Because that's actually, I think, more relevant on the real spiritual level of it, is like, did it actually fall, or was it just part of the show and it wasn't that dramatic of a moment? If you really look at where we're going and what it's bringing, that it was just, it's just like watching a movie where a car explodes and a major thing happens. I mean, we've become so like, now, if you were to show that to a silent movie and to the people at the first theaters, they would be like, if you put them in a movie theater today at THX with, you know, the biggest sound, and you put them in a big theater like an IMAX, and you took a person who was like watching silent films with Charlie Chaplin, and you put on a movie and you put on a big car explosion and like a big space thing, they would be like, holy fuck. You know, they'd probably like it'd be too much. It'd be like, what the bang, you know? But it's like, now we see that and we're just like, yeah.
It's like, if a tower falls in the collective and there's no cross of planning to make anyone care about it, does it make a sound?
That's an interesting viewpoint. But that's also the other thing of where I think the informational and the connection of the we, or the information of the plan, right, has been, well, if I haven't been able to see it, it's not happening. If the news hasn't said it, then that means it's not happening. Or if the news has said it, that is what is going on. It's giving that outer authority and actually responding without actually checking your own authority. It's like they know better. They know better. They did the research. They did that, right? Where if you look at the people in the last 2 years who've done the best, who have felt the most confidence, and who have actually felt the most empowered are the people who didn't made the responses on their own, didn't go, I'm doing this because the FDA told me to in their research, or because Fauci said, or whatever. The people who have the power are the ones that took it within themselves and that didn't respond to things that felt way fucking weird. Like it was not natural and it was not weird. And I know that this show kind of took a unique turn because I think it was a really good way of helping people to understand the frequencies that are ending to the new ones and how to respond. But I want to bring this last part up because our shows have been really intense, and I want to end with a little intense.
Take it away, heretic.
That every month that goes by till 2027, in my opinion, will be compounded as more extreme as the outer authority is going to try and still continue to take power from people. And it's only in the consent of your authority to give it to them. And what's coming up here is the GMI that's now never been tested on humans, but ate mice. But it might have been rice. They could have just drawn little ears on them at this point and said they were mice. 170 million doses have been ordered, which we don't know. That could be a lie. But if there is that as the truth, they are going to come up with something to get people to have that outer authority. And when I look at the astrology and I look at these eclipses and I look at what's coming, and anybody who's lost in the planning cycle here, oh boy, it's just I think it's a good warning to people to really go, are you going to do this again? Like, are you really going to fall for whatever the new weird thing they're going to come up with at this point? I mean, yesterday, the White House new, doctor said that God gave us two arms, one for the flu shot and one for the CV shot.
Deplorable.
And when we think of everything that we've talked about on a way crazy scale, okay, like, I mean, it's too much to even say to even go there, right? People have to watch the episodes. But if you think about all that crazy shit connected to it, I think what we've been saying for many episodes now, but this episode to kind of bring it into with that coming and whatever that's going to happen with that, you don't order 170 million when nobody's taking them right now without trying to find a way to fizzle that in somehow in a planning, right? They've got some plan. I just feel like it's more important than ever for people to use this as a good test that maybe didn't do that over the last year or the last 2 years, to test to go the opposite direction or whatever feels responding to you, which natural, right? Which I don't think that anybody, hopefully now, will feel natural about something that's not tested on humans, that then if they look back to the other one really wasn't tested correctly, and that it's being shoved out for the first time of any product ever in medicine, that vitamins have more testing than this.
Desperate forces will take desperate measures. And so, it's really important at looking at all the different ways in which institutionalized and homogenized substances are being channeled into our bodies, not just the most obvious ones, because this might just be some kind of decoy energy, and the real, next source of some kind of issue might come from other places that we're, relying on the institutions for some kind of nourishment or some kind of sustenance in some way. So I think it's really important to look at homogenized sources of nourishment and to really have a lot of discernment in your authority and in your body, and really, really know what you're putting in your body and where it's coming from. And if you don't have absolute transparency about that, to think twice in this eclipse cycle.
Especially in a Scorpio Taurus, very shadowy, but also the physical realm that's natural and beautiful, that doesn't hide. Taurus doesn't hide. It's like, hey, I've got seeds. This is my farm. I can't hide it. They're doing crop circles on it. You know what I mean? Like, I can't hide the farm. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you think of the cricket thing too, they're hiding those in like factories and manufacturing the crickets. And it's all out now. Like, it's in stores now. But and again, that's where it's like, are we really sure they're actually crickets? Or are they real? Are they natural crickets from the earth, or are they crickets that are being cloned? Are they crickets that are being
fed some stuff?
Yeah, that's what's a whole.
You know, crickets to me are like little. I mean, they're animals. They're beautiful creatures of the earth, but like also beings like that, you know, carry a lot of parasites, and parasites can carry their own parasites, and so on and so forth. So, you know, again, it's really about transparency about what we're putting in our bodies. And even the water that's coming out of your tap, I know that sounds like super top level conspiracy theory, but it just felt pertinent to share that channel right now.
But I mean, honestly, if I were to give kind of a one-line view, if you think of the planning and the pipes, just take the simple part of the pipes. They're all getting old. So think of the contaminants in the pipes, right? All the systems are falling down. And I don't care if you're like, well, I'm on a new house and a new property. It's like, it's still being fed by an old pipe system that brings it to you. You might have brand new pipes, but there's an old rusty pipe that was laid down by somebody caught up in the cross of planning a long time ago, who went to work at 6 a.m. and died at 48.
And Scorpio rules that which is beneath the earth. So things that are running beneath our feet could be undergoing unexpected transformations. Yes,
especially that's hidden underneath. And at the same time, that goes into humans' bodies at the same time, what's going on. But to kind of like finish that part of that, the crickets and the parasites, it's interesting that crickets have always been, and I've said this a lot lately, it's like, it's always a good luck if you hear a cricket. You don't stop a cricket from singing and doing its little violin bow.
Jiminy Cricket.
And then Jiminy Cricket being the conscious be your guide. Eat your conscience and destroy Jiminy Cricket and eat it. That sounds like Pleasure Island to me. And that's where a lot of people are running towards, is Pleasure Island, you know, where Pleasure Island's coming down. But because it's not really pleasure, it's false pleasure, right? The idea in Pleasure Island in Pinocchio when he goes, right?
Oh, okay.
You were looking at me like, Pleasure Island? Is this a fucking reality show you're talking about? No, Pleasure Island's where Pinocchio goes. And remember, he doesn't bring Jiminy Cricket. Remember, he goes along with that young Irish kid, right? Right?
Them Irish.
I know. And remember, that's where he's like, you want to have a cigar? And they start smoking cigars and playing pool. Remember? And it's all the boys and they're playing cigars and they're having pool. And Pinocchio starts puking because he's smoking too much. And then Jimmy Cricket finally shows up. And it's right when he starts turning into a donkey, right?
Chaos.
Because they're turning them into donkeys, which is happening in the world right now. Turn into a Democrat. Turn into a Democrat. Turn into a Democrat. It's insane. And that movie is so relevant of where people can learn, I feel like, well, this is what some other guy is doing, so I'm going to go do it too. That is way, if you just think across the planning, where it starts.
And especially because we're in a first line phase right now. So the first line, the investigator is always like, ask someone else how they did it.
Right.
To establish your foundation.
Even human design, if it doesn't feel called to you, then don't do it. You know what I mean? Like, maybe your strategy and authority might say it's something else. That's the natural way of it. It's kind of a weird thing. Or astrology, right? It's like, I don't try and force people to like astrology. Like they either like it or they don't, you know, or they feel called to it or they don't. It's like, I'm not trying to go, prove astrology's real, motherfuckers. You know, I'm not trying to fucking run to every fucking TV station and be like, astrology said this was going to happen. I made my own one and I focused on the me and did a we of like others that have their own thing, and
Right.
I don't know.
More about individual resonance than
Right.
that sacrificial giving of power away to an external authority.
Yeah, and especially I feel like this full moon this weekend, and why we're doing the event, the last full moon of summer, because I feel like this fall is so intense. But it's also, I think, for here at High Vibe with all of us, especially the shows that we all differently do on the network and how we all come together, for us to come together under a Pisces full moon and a Mercury retrograde with all these planets retrograde and everything offline, but this beautiful full moon in Pisces for people to reconnect with in this crazy reality in Virgo we're in, to look at the beauty and to look at the wider scope of things, of understanding how to bridge that beautiful gap of spirit and reality in a beautiful new way, to really be, I don't want to say armored up in the right way, but I just want to say just like confident within following their right energy within themselves to go through the, because if you think of it from an earth scale, that means we're at halfway through the year. Because if you really want to take real time, right, the 0 Aries point of spring is the new year. And so this is the halfway part of the year.
I love that reminder.
Right? That we are coming into the next cycle of this year. And it's going to be the craziest one we've ever gone through in our lives.
And it's really elegant how the human design gates also reveal this, because as we lead up to this Pisces full moon, the sun is in gate 64, which is before completion. So it's basically saying, even in terms of the gate thematic, that we're about to finish a cycle for this first part of the year.
Is that the actual full moon?
No. But I have it here, actually.
Can we look at it? So it's weird that we were talking on a reflector moment tonight.
Well, generally speaking, but we all have our electromagnetics that we're linking
of course,
up.
I'm just saying though that if somebody
A
were to
very
have been
open-
born,
Yeah.
they would have been
They have their unconscious too that probably factors
right.
in.
That's
but
true, but that's
what it
kind of
is
an
saying is
interesting-
that it's not necessarily super emotionally charged right now. It's not super energetically, sacrally charged. Where all of the action really is up in the crown right now. So we are looking at the big picture mainly.
yeah,
The
it's
64,
interesting.
the 63, so Sun, Earth, and Pluto all up here in the crown.
That's interesting.
Yeah. And all these like bigger concepts we were looking at, like looking
Galactic,
at the whole solar
yeah.
system, the whole wave cycle, the whole precession of the equinoxes. So that's what these gates are all about, the bird's eye view.
Which in many ways, I feel like this full moon in Pisces is going to be a higher version of a bird's eye view, into the reality, looking directly at it, for us to really get a reminder of not the illusion, but seeing through the illusion.
I think this Pisces full moon is actually, as we finish off this 64th gate and we've kind of completed, on the mental plane, because the crown is feeding into the mind, and we're kind of completing this view, this visual look at what this last 6 months has been about. Then what we get what gets culminated here is in gate 22, which is a solar plexus, but it's individual spirit. And it's about, this is the most potent and palpable place where the individual spirit speaks through the individual. So we have a lot of creativity here, because that's where a lot of people source their creativity from, is actually from their spiritual connection within themselves. And that's how each creation is so unique. And then
That Mars Neptune square that's starting to build, Mars at 35 and Neptune at 36 is creating that channel. And that Mars is in a weird cycle here as its shadow getting ready for the retrograde, and the big square off to Neptune, which is interesting. That creates a channel. What channel is that one, 35 to 36?
This is the channel of transitoriness. So this is the collective experiential channel, which is all about in gate 30, recognizing what our deepest desire is, and then launching into an experience, manifesting something through that emotional awareness. And then we deal with the fates on the other side. And the fates say, did you follow the right desire? Or was that desire out of line with who you really are? And either way, we learn something, we gain new skills and experiences, and we take others along with us, for better or worse. So
yeah, because that's the only channel that transiting wise is in the personality side's happening.
Yeah, true. And so, yeah, we're definitely being launched into a, come on. Oh, it's Mercury retrograde.
And that's the interesting part too, when we look at this personality side to see what this Mercury retrograde is happening gate-wise that you could help us out with here. Because I feel like this one's, look at how interesting this full moon.
It's a big emotional purge too, because anytime the solar plexus connects to the throat, you can think of that 50% of humanity who do not have emotional definition consistently. And we've got Neptune and Mars here. It's like whatever has been stagnating in that solar plexus is coming up to be expressed in some way. And so what's the secret, everyone? It's don't make decisions out of the highs or the lows, because that'll launch you into the wrong experience. Only through waiting out the cycle of the wave to see when clarity arrives can we actually launch into the correct experience. And that's how you select the right desire, the right experience. It's that you wait for the clarity to emerge. You don't pick necessarily the most exciting one. You don't pick or run away from the most depressing one. You let both of those mellow out into this overall clarity, and then you move forward. And when you can do that, you're going to move onto a resistance-free trajectory, not one that's defined
one
by
where
a bunch of turbulence.
The pipeline's already just flowing and it's meant to be naturally just kind of, we got to this point, okay.
It's like shifting between different timelines, and then eventually the greater, more common denominator timeline comes through and merges, and then go, no resistance.
Now with Mercury, that's going to station retro with this full moon at the 18th gate in the spleen.
Buddhahood, which is a really interesting one.
Which is funny because it's happening in Libra,
Yeah. 18 line 6 is Buddhahood, the perfected form.
Interesting.
Why? Because 6th line is the perfection of any quality. So any 6th line is looking to perfect not only that gate, not only that channel, but the entire stream that it's a part of. So Buddhahood here is the perfection of the pattern of the form, 1858, channel of judgment, and the expression of that into some kind of talent or expression or enthusiasm. Because when your form is perfected, whatever comes out of it is also perfect.
It says gate 18, work on what has been spoiled or spoilt. The vigilance and determination to uphold and defend basic and fundamental human rights. That's going to be very interesting to see that that's where we're going to have Mercury come multiple times in opposition to Jupiter, which happens to be at that 17 gate, which that's all the way up in the,
which is the
Ajna, right?
Interestingly. So our feeling in our body, the spleen, and what the body truly accepts or rejects or needs, does not need, because of the splenic physical intelligence, is going to be in opposition to the opinions that Jupiter is expanding. And it's in a 3rd line, so it's trial and error in opinions.
So it's like a 3-6 or a 6-3?
Kind of. But it's saying that we're going to be bumping into differing opinions about what's going to be perfecting our form for survival.
While recalculating and thinking in a splenic place of what feels, I guess, I don't know, it's kind of weird that the fundamental defending and upholding of fundamental human rights is happening in a place of where we have our immune system and we can sense what
is healthy
and safe or not. And that's going to be when this shot's going to roll out, actually, in the middle of this retrograde.
And it's going to take us on a crisis-oriented, gate 36, new emotional experience, gate 35. And we're going to make progress either way, but, it's progress or not.
And how interesting that Venus, because Venus is the only planet at full speed, not in shadow, not retrograde, and it's at the 40th gate, which is the one part of the cross of planning, which is that part of the will of like, I got to do this, right? I got to
get what I need for the tribe.
Sounds like a clusterfuck a little bit, but I think it's not so much if you, like what you were saying earlier, like knowing what to...
No sudden movements.
No sudden movements that are altering the natural flow of things, like...
Yeah, and it's emotional too. So that implies, you know, where do we get our biggest emotional spikes? From other human beings.
Right.
So don't let other human beings spike you in a sudden twist into a new trajectory that you haven't given yourself time to reach emotional clarity about, because you could step off onto the wrong path in that way.
As you would say from our last episode, take one pixel and the next pixel will then reveal itself before you see the whole picture, because you won't be able to see the whole picture if you're just going off
and you don't have to go looking for it. That's the thing. The mind wants to like find that next pixel and complete the puzzle or complete the full picture. This is bubbling up out of you at its own rate, at its own timing. And if it's not happening, if it's not reaching that point of clarity, there's nothing to do yet. And as we've said many times before, day by day as we go into the future, alignment is more and more a measure of life and death, not just, oh, it was inconvenient, or, oh, I wasted some time and energy, or, oh, I'm disappointed.
This is the first full moon since that full moon that we had in Aquarius, where we said after this, there's no more, I think we just said like, there's no more fuck ups. It was one way to put it, right? It was like, you don't want to fuck up after this. And this is going to be that first full moon that
shows us that.
Yeah.
That's very much...
Which that could be the weird part of Pisces, right? Where people get
dreaming
lost,
about something.
Yeah, or just misguided because they're not in alignment with their soul.
Right. They're getting pulled by the juicy complexity of the solar plexus and not remaining in the body-based objectivity of the spleen, which is just, it's not a conversation with the spleen. It's like a yep or no.
Well, it's kind of interesting to me too that the 8th gate sits in Libra, where the defending of fundamental human rights in a splenic energy is kind of like how relationships can be life or death in our lives that we choose. They could be draining us energetically to being also our people that really are in alignment with us, that are on the same thread of seeing the same things that are things to defend that are important for survival in the end of the day.
Right. So looking at it in a more not so harsh and stark, and this is why it's so important to have connection to your inner authority, because that's the only way you can truly know how any of these transits are going to play out for you. This could also be a power move of listening to your inner spirit, you actually being able to feel that inner call of your spirit very strongly as the full moon brings it to its full light, its full revelation, and jumping into a new adventure, a new timeline, a new emotional experience that does bring you to the state of Buddhahood, of the perfected form.
I can feel that.
At the high vibe party.
Yeah.
Full moon event.
Full moon event. I was actually not even thinking about that, which is the most even more, it's more beautiful that there are, I think what's beautiful about Pisces is we can have much more beautiful experiences and we realize in a wholesome way if we're really in alignment in our true spiritual self and we're really allowing the natural flow of things.
Pisces can have it all.
Then it feels like, you know, I'm like, oh, that's right. we do have that event that's so going to be so beautiful. And at a moment where I think it is so, it's not like it's so important, you must go. It's much more of like, hey, like, look at where we're at. Let's all come together and start to talk about some of these things. And I think it's going to be a great thing, especially with all that's been happening. It's a beautiful celebration of beautiful things happening for people in the world and for all of us to realize there's a lot more good that can be happening in these times than bad, you know? That's the only way to counter the bad is to live the good, you know? And that's what Pisces, I think, is the ultimate thing, is it is the ultimate good. It's the highest of the good. It's the highest of the ultraviolet light, right? It's the highest good. And there is that irony of Virgo being opposite, which is the service that we do, even though I know that could be kind of caught up in the cross of planning a little bit. But I still feel that no matter what cross we're in, there is a feeling of, like you said earlier, the greater good is much more when we're in alignment in ourselves, doing things that make us excited and feel good. That's good for the environment around us in the auric field naturally. If you have 7.5, almost 8 billion people in frustration and bitterness and anger,
that's what's happening.
That's what's happening. That's not going to be a very fun field of an auric earth to be in. So, well, we reached 9 on here, so 9-centered being.
An episode for every center.
I can't wait to go outside.
Beyond.
I know. Well, thanks so much, everyone. And again, Friday, we'll be here at the studios. Go to highvibe.tv, click on Last Moon, and you can get all the info for tickets here in the studio to meet us, hang out with us, watch the events at the event center we have here, or if you can live stream it on highvibe.tv on our apps and so forth. You can find all that at highvibe.tv down below. Appreciate you, Dylan. Remember, he's got an amazing Peru trip that he's doing here in retreat at the end of October. The links will be down below for his website, and the links down below for High Vibe and all the other stuff. So appreciate you all, and much love to you, brother.
Much love to you, brother. Thank you.
Of course.
Till next time.